Hi everyone, I'm Erin Thompson of Everyday Expressions. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am so excited to share a mixed media card with you, and we're going to talk about all of the things that we love about mixed media, but sometimes I think it's a little overwhelming and you don't really know how to use all these fun paints and glazes and things like that that you might have in your stash. And so I just thought I would create a card today featuring some new Botanical Blooms products from the Picket Studios March release and share some of my favorite tips and tricks on using different mixed media products and really how to pull it all together so that it's not overwhelming. And sometimes, to be honest, I create something and I think, I get so excited to use all these different products and it just looks like a mess afterwards. So I thought this would be a good example of how to use all these fun new products that we've got, some new, some old, that we've got in our stash, and how some just some simple tips on how to pull it all together. So, like I said, I'm using new products from the Botanical Blooms collection, and I began with the background stamp called Floating Dreams, and it is so cute. It's got dandelions and feathers and all those fun floaty little things that we see in the springtime. And I stamped it in embossing ink and then used white embossing powder and heat set it. And now I'm going in with Distress Oxide inks. I think they're so lovely to blend together. And this color combination was a little bit inspired by some of Christina Warner's posts. She shares some different color combinations. And I was inspired by some of hers, and then I mixed it up a little bit. So I'm using Antique Linen, Speckled Egg, Uncharted Mariner, and then Black Soot for this color combination. And I just go in and I begin ink blending the Antique Linen, then the Speckled Egg. This is Uncharted Mariner, and then I'll end with Black Soot. And a little tip I've got here, I love the paper inking palettes, and I definitely love them when I'm using stencils to hold down my paper and stencil. But I have also discovered that I love the new 4x4 paper inking palette just to hold my ink pads. I don't like to buy a lot of extra things like ink pad holders and things. It clutters up my desk. So I love these paper inking palettes for more than just holding paper and my stencils. I find that I love it to hold those ink pads while I'm ink blending. But I do like to keep my paper on my desk so that I can move it around easily, and then my brushes move easily back onto my paper to do my ink blending. So here I've just dribbled a little bit of water, and one quick tip I want to point out is I used a paper towel and I started in Antique Linen and then went down just to wipe off any ink from my embossed images, and it just cleans it up a little bit and makes those images shine. So now I'm using 2 arch dies from the Basic Die Cutting Set 1. I love these. There's so many different things in this die set that you can use. And I created a frame with 2 of the dies just to kind of give us a little bit more of a focal point over top of that inked and embossed background. So here I'm just trimming my cardstock to 4 by 5¼ inches. And this is I believe this is called the Fanciful Feathers die set. And I'm going to use those along with the Layering Flora Sweet Cherry Blossom dies. And I'll use those to add a little bit more interest into our focal point. But first, I'm going to show you how I created the feathers. I take a piece of Bristol Strathmore Smooth paper. It's a good mixed media paper. It can take a lot of ink, a lot of water. I always joke and say it can take a lot of abuse. And I begin by spraying Uncharted Mariner Distress Spray Stain. And you see I'm just kind of dabbing up the ink from my craft mat, creating all those really organic little specks and speckles on my paper. Then I've sprayed some I believe I want to correct myself. I said speckled egg. I used salvage patina on this card. I used it on the ink blended background, and now I'm using it in the distress oxide spray. So little correction there. Sorry for my mistake. So I spray it in a couple of areas. I begin with the stain and then I go back in with the oxides. I like the way that they work together, so you don't just have that solid kind of oxidation look on everything. You just have a little bit of it by spraying these salvage patina on there. Once I've got it all done, I spritzed with water, I dribbled, I lifted it, then I always dry in between pretty much every step with my heat gun. So now I've placed my cardstock into a splat box, and I'm going to use some mixed media collection called Paper Splatter watercolor from the Picket Fence Studio shop. I am using first Black Magic, then I go in with liquid gold, and then finally you'll see I use liquid white snowflake. These are a water-based medium, and they are perfect for creating those splatters. I just go in and I dry them with the heat gun. And one thing I have to note is some water-based mediums like this will pick up the background ink color, and I will tell you that these did not. I was very pleased with the white snowflake. It did not pick up any of the very saturated blue ink. It stayed white, and I love that. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. Then I just take that, I run it through the die machine with those fanciful feathers. This is the original collection. I think this release actually has another set of these, but this is the die set that was released a few months ago. Now I'm adding some of that liquid gold onto a piece of cardstock, and you'll see I end up putting actually quite a bit because I decided that I wanted to die cut my flowers from this. Now, it is beautiful, I have to say. When I dried it with the heat gun, I love that kind of swirly effect when I put down quite a bit of the medium. But I have to say, if I did it again, I would probably just put my flowers down and paint the flowers and not waste a lot of that precious liquid splatter. It took, and then I also went in from behind also. You have to be careful with some mediums. Now, I'm not really sure if these have acrylic paint in them or not. It doesn't say, but some acrylic paint mediums will bubble up when you heat them. And so just to be on the safe side, I was very careful in heating that. I heated from the back, I heated from the front, and I just didn't let my paper get too hot because I did not want any of that bubbling effect. So then I run a couple of the cherry blossom dies through the die machine, cut that out. And I did find that I missed a couple of spots with the liquid gold. So now I'm going back in, and this is where I realized, oh, if I had just painted it in the first place, I wouldn't have wasted so much of my product. And so I just go in and touch up. You can tell it's just kind of using a cheap paintbrush and painting those little spots in. No technique or artistry involved in that, but I love the way they came out. Just a beautiful shiny gold color. So now I take that frame that I cut, and I have to say, here's another tip. If I wasn't thinking when I cut this out of just my Hammermill cardstock, I would, if I did this again, I would have cut this out of some of the Bristol Strathmore smooth paper because it's a lot sturdier, and like I said earlier, it can take a lot of these mixed mediums. But this is just the cardstock, and it ended up being just fine. And I painted some of that liquid gold on it just to bring the gold back into another element on the card. I think this is something sometimes we don't think about when we're creating these cards. When you're thinking about design elements in art, sometimes you look back and you step back and you look at a card and you think, this is pretty, but there's just something not quite right. And a lot of times it's because one of those elements, kind of, I don't want to say a rule, but quote unquote rule of art, is just not quite right on our card. And if you step back and look at it, sometimes it might be that you need to bring another color out in another way. And so that's what I did with these arches, bringing them out, bringing the gold from the flowers back out into the arch. And I think it more balances the look of the card. And here I decided I didn't want to glue. These dies are very, very delicate and detailed. And so I just added some tape. I created a shadow layer with that white piece because they're so delicate that just the blue kind of got lost on the card. And I think that's another kind of art design element that sometimes doesn't look right. And if you add a shadow or a drop shadow to a delicate die that's maybe getting lost and not really creating that focal point on a card that you want, creating a shadow or a drop shadow definitely helps bring that die cut to the forefront a little bit more from the background, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It definitely gives your eye a better focal point. Now I'm just adding some foam tape to the back of my frame to give it some dimension. And here you'll see I'm just kind of checking to see if I like the placement of everything, and yep, I think it all works. So now I'm going to stamp the sentiment from the Build a Wreath set, the wreath building set called Feathers. I used You Made My Day Special, and I just heat embossed it with some gold embossing powder. And then I will just trim it out of the paper. And you'll see I create a flag out of it, or some people call it a fishtail flag. Just with my scissors, cut it right down the middle and then up each side to create that. It's kind of funny, a little story. I used to dread doing that because I was not very good at it. So it just takes practice, and stick with it if you feel the same way. I finally am a little bit more confident in my skills in creating those. And I think it's worth it when I do it because I like the effect of that. So while I'm working on kind of putting this whole card together, and what I'm doing is pretty obvious when I add the foam tape and things like that, I just want to recap, since this is about mixed media and how to put everything together. We really used a lot of different products, kind of mixed media items on this card, and I just wanted to kind of recap that for you. We stamped and heat embossed the background. Then we ink blended with Distress Oxide inks. Then we created a background panel using Distress spray stains and oxides, and then used splatters to kind of add a little bit more interest and detail to that cardstock. And also, don't forget, we added just water spatters to the background and onto the feathers. And then we again heat embossed the sentiment. So lots of different kind of techniques going on in this card that seem individually kind of difficult to do, but in the end, it's just about how you put it all together. And it's just fun to really play with a lot of these different products that maybe we see other people using, or new things that are on the market and you're not sure. It really, in the end, just takes a little bit of practice and figuring out how it all, where each one works and how it all comes together. And in the end, as long as you keep some of those basic design concepts in mind that we talked about, you really can create a very pretty card that is mixed media. It's kind of you have to create your own style, but a lot of people see it and they say, wow, that's really cool. How did you do that? Or that is really so pretty. And so that's where, in making this card, I just thought it would be a good idea to point some of these things out, and that it's really not as difficult as some people maybe are intimidated, and kind of afraid to try some different things. So finally, I'm in the home stretch and I'm adhering the feathers and the flowers onto the card. And you'll see once I get them glued down, I kind of use my fingers to kind of bend the feathers up and mold the flowers to give it just a little bit of dimension. And then finally, I will finish it with iridescent moonshine sequins for just a little added touch there. I hope you've enjoyed this card and that you're a little bit more emboldened to go out and try some of the mixed media products that maybe you've had in your stash. If you like this video, I would love it if you would follow me on YouTube at Everyday Expressions and hit the like and subscribe to be notified when I've got new videos. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.